All right, let's get it going here on a Tuesday night, a unique Tuesday night. It's a Panther-Lair show live post-game. We did this a lot during the football season, haven't had as many during the basketball season, decided to only do it when the opportunity presented itself, and certainly did tonight with Pitt hosting Wake Forest for a 6 o'clock game at the Peterson Events Center here on Tuesday, March 2nd. That dovetailed nicely, set up perfectly for a post-game show. And by golly, wouldn't you know it, the Panthers went out and got themselves a little win. There's very little that a win can't cure, you know, whether it's a losing streak or off-court drama or off-field drama, if we're talking about football or baseball or something like that. A lot of things that can seem to be going wrong with a team or a program or a situation, there are very few of them that can't be cured with a win. And that's what Pitt got tonight, a 70-57 win over Wake Forest, breaking a 5-game losing streak, evening the overall record, at 10-10, and just generally, I think, creating a lot of just good vibes with the way this team played against Wake Forest. And obviously we have a little bit more analysis than just that, than good vibes. But I mean, I think that might be the first thing I come out of this game thinking about. And it's one of the first things that I've read on Twitter and the message boards. The game ended around 8. You know, we had about a half hour here between the end of the game and the start of the live stream here, the podcast, and just reading different things. Like I say, on the message boards or Twitter comments, reactions to the game. And one of the sort of broadest appraisals, one of the broadest reactions, most general reactions to this game, I think I would sum it up as, boy, this team is kind of fun to root for right now. And that's not entirely an indictment of Xavier Johnson or Au'Diese Toney. That's not to say that those two guys weren't or were hard to root for or something like that. I don't think anybody had a bad vibe about those guys when they were here. I think Xavier Johnson could be frustrating at times with the way he played, but he also, I mean, we say hero ball sort of derisively, but I mean, he made a lot of good plays for this team, a lot of game-winning plays for this team, and I think Au'Diese Toney generally was liked by the fans. So, I mean, I don't think, when I say that this team right now is it's very easy to root for, I don't think that's necessarily an indictment of those two guys. I think it's more a reflection of the guys that are here. They're underdogs. When those two players, when Xavier Johnson and Au'Diese Toney left this team, no one gave them a chance. No one gave this team a chance of winning any games the rest of the way. I think most people felt like the chances were low even with Johnson and Toney. When you take two of the three leading scorers off the roster, people don't expect a whole lot out of you. And you've got a freshman point guard, and you've got another freshman getting a lot of minutes, and you've got the transfer who hasn't played a whole lot getting some serious time. And I mean, it's a stripped-down roster is how it looked and how it felt. And we're Americans, right? We like to root for the underdog. And this team became underdogs, even though, I mean, they were favorites tonight against Wake Forest. I think as a whole, this team and this program had a feel of being underdogs. And we like to root for underdogs. And right now, it's a, you know, this team, you know, looks like a bunch of scrappy young kids fighting and clawing, energized by the opportunities they're getting that they maybe didn't have earlier this season, particularly a couple guys who are getting more playing time than they've gotten all season. And I think we like those kinds of storylines. We like seeing those kinds of results, and I think we liked seeing it in the NC State game on Sunday, and I think we certainly liked seeing it tonight when Pitt goes out and gets a win over Wake Forest. Of course, this is the Panther-Lair show. I should introduce us since we've got our live stream going here on Tuesday night, as we always do, 8:30 p.m. on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then we have the podcast if you're listening throughout the week. We appreciate you tuning in. We're going to try and not make it too much. It is a post-game show, so it's going to be a post-game show. Hopefully you don't mind listening to that on Thursday or Friday or whenever you tune into the podcast. You know the website by now, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends, Panther-Lair.com. I think it's the best site on the internet for Pitt sports coverage, and I know our message boards are the best place on the internet for Pitt football, basketball, recruiting conversation. So if you're a Pitt fan, you need to go to Panther-Lair.com. Of course, we got to give our shout out to Home Field Apparel. If you guys don't know about them, I got the shirt on. I wore this. I put it on earlier in the day because I knew the podcast was going to be tonight, the live stream. I wanted to, show off the home field gear. Even though it's got a football helmet, it's warm up the victory lights, is what it says. Kind of a retro look, a retro feel, and that's the kind of thing that they have at Home Field. It's a cool looking shirt, and I can't really tell you enough about how comfortable it is. It's soft, holds its form. I've washed this shirt a lot of times, of course, as you would probably hope and expect. And it's held its shape. It still fits as well as it did the day I took it out of the package. So homefieldapparel.com. It's a place you got to go. We're going to try and work up some promos with them this week, or this month, I should say, give you guys some special deals. But go take a look at their collection. Their Pitt collection is awesome, and they've got they got a lot of schools that they're licensed with, and they've got some great gear there. Homefieldapparel.com. Follow them on Twitter too. It's at Home Field or at Home Field Apparel. I forget exactly what if you search Home Field Apparel on Twitter, you're gonna find them without too much trouble. They're a great Twitter account to follow. And even better, they make great T-shirts and sweatshirts. So go check that out. Homefieldapparel.com. Instant reactions to this game. 70-57 win. Like I say, breaking the losing streak. Big one right off the top. An easy team to root for, a fun team to root for, and I think a fun team to watch right now is another one that's sort of right off the bat. I think heading into Sunday's game, I felt like this team was very intriguing. I was really curious to see what they were going to look like without two major pieces. Two of the top three scorers, two starters, two guys who were centerpieces of this team. This team had a three-man core, a big three all season. And two of those three guys left over the course of like 25 hours midweek last week. And so I was curious, and we did a live stream on Thursday afternoon after Audice Toney joined Xavier Johnson in the transfer portal, and we talked about it. And, we had a lot of conversation about that situation. And I think a lot of it's centered on what is this team going to look like? What is this team going to be when you don't have Xavier Johnson and Audice Toney? And we could guess at the lineups, we could guess at the rotations and how they were going to fill the minutes, but what that was actually going to look like on the court, that was a bit more up in the air. I think after two games, we've got some ideas now. I think we know that this team has not dropped off at all in terms of defensive intensity. They haven't dropped off at all in terms of how hard they play on that end of the court and how well they play on that end of the court. Audice Toney was their best defender, so I wondered if the team defense would take a hit just by losing their best individual defender. I don't think it has. I don't think it's seen much a drop-off at all. I think they played really well against Wake Forest. They gave NC State fits. They forced Wake Forest into the kind of scoring slump that Pitt usually goes through in games. You know what I mean? Like, we look back at so many different Pitt games over the last couple years, in the Capel era at least, and I think really even you could find games in the Stallings era. During that 0-18 season, I remember specifically looking at certain games and saying, look, they had this streak, this losing streak, and or a scoreless streak. And that's what cost them the game. If they just get a couple baskets in there, they grab an offensive rebound or two and get an easy put-back basket, it maybe changes the outcome of the game. And I think we could point to games like that over the last 3 years with Capel. And, and certainly this season, I think you can find games where you'd say, boy, they had this 6-minute stretch, this 8-minute stretch, this 9-minute stretch where they just couldn't buy a bucket. And that's where they ultimately lost the game. Tonight, it was Wake Forest who had that stretch. They had 8 minutes and 18 seconds in the second half without a field goal. I think from the 17:37 mark, they made a basket. They missed their next 6 field goal attempts. And then around 9:19 to go in the game, they made a 3 that broke that streak. I mean, I think they had some free throws. It wasn't completely a scoreless streak, but 8 minutes and 18 seconds without a field goal. That's really good defense from Pitt. And I'm putting a lot of the credit on Pitt's defense because it's not like Wake Forest is an inept offensive team. And that's something else we should probably point to. I mean, this is a team that, put 70 plus on Pitt in the game in Winston-Salem earlier last month, I guess it was in January or February, something like that, right after the Duke game, and they score 57 points. Pitt holds them to 57 points. Wake Forest makes 19 field goals. They make 10 three-pointers, but they needed 29 attempts to get there. They shot under 36% from the field. This is a good defensive performance against Wake Forest, and they played really good on defense against NC State. The defense has not dropped off at all with, Pitt 2.0, for this season. It has not dropped off at all. And if anything, it's been better in the last 2 games. And I don't know if overall I would say that it's been better, but it definitely has not been worse. They've managed to keep that up. They've been out of sorts on offense. And out of sorts probably isn't the right word. Disjointed has been said a lot. Disjointed has been tossed around, and I tend to agree with that. I think on offense, in the last 2 games, they've looked like a team playing with a brand new point guard, and playing with a brand new starter at small forward, and getting, significant minutes for guys who hadn't been getting significant minutes for the bulk of the season, and certainly in the month or month and a half leading up to the last 2 games. They looked like that kind of team. They looked out of sorts at times. They had guys firing threes. I mean, they had Abdul Kareem Coulibaly trying 2 shots from outside the arc, and I don't care that he made one. He doesn't need to take any of them. And we'll talk a lot about Nike Sabandi, but I mean, his 3 3-pointers that he made, Sabandi went 3 of 5 from outside the arc. Those 3 that he made, which one of them did you feel good about when it came out of his hands? Which one of them did you feel good about when it hit the rim? I can't say that any of them. Every single one of them, I was like, when it came out of his hands. And when it hit the rim, I said, and then it goes in. I say, oh, okay. That was sort of the course of things. But that's what this offense looked like. And I think we knew that. If you go back to last Thursday, we said, well, it's going to be Justin Champagnie and a bunch of other guys, which is kind of what it was prior to Tony and Johnson leaving. But at least then it was Champagnie and Tony and Johnson and a bunch of other guys. Now it's just Champagnie and a bunch of other guys. And I think that's another reaction, coming out of this game, particularly when you juxtapose it with the NC State game. NC State, you have Femi Odukale going for 18 points, game high, obviously a career high, season high, and all of that. Led the way, 18 points, I think 5 assists, 1 turnover, 5 rebounds, played really well. Tonight it was Nike Sabandi who stepped up, 23 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, only 1 turnover, played a monster game for Pitt. And quite frankly, played the kind of game that you thought he was going to give you when he came as a transfer from Miami of Ohio. I mean, this is what he did at Miami of Ohio. He had something like 26 games where he scored 20 points or more at Miami of Ohio. He had none at Pitt. He had 1 double-figure game all season this year. Which game was that? I got the page up right now. Oh, Florida State, of course. He scored 12 points. I blanked on that. That's the only time he got into double figures this season, let alone 20 points. And like I said, he had 26 games with 20 points or more at Miami of Ohio. 76 games with double-digit scoring at Miami of Ohio. And so you expected him to come to Pitt and be a prolific offensive weapon, a guy who could score a lot of points, and it wasn't happening. And we already got questions coming in here on the live stream, and it's a question I think that people have been talking about and discussing. Where is it? Oh, Roman. Yeah, our guy Roman, who's always on the live stream. We appreciate seeing him. He says, Chris, why the heck was Sabandi on the bench so much this season? Dude can ball. Yeah, he looks great tonight. And I think he showed some signs against Florida State. I thought he was decent against NC State. Obviously, he had a great game tonight. I think, and that's been a common reaction. How could Nike Sabandi have been coming off the bench all this time? Why didn't he get more minutes? Why wasn't he playing more? And I think there are a few things at play there. I think there are a few things to consider. I think when you look at what he did when he would get on the court, he wasn't playing like this in his previous appearances throughout this season on either end of the court. I don't think he was playing great defensively when he played earlier this season, and he wasn't producing like this offensively. Like I say, he 1 game in double-digit scoring, and I mean he was getting minutes. He played 15 minutes in the loss at Wake Forest and scored 3 points. He played 25 minutes against Louisville and scored 8. What else? Notre Dame, he's played 12 minutes and scored 2 points. NC State, the first game against NC State, the home game, he's played 14 minutes and scored 3 points. So he's had some opportunities. He's gotten some playing time, and he didn't play like this. Now, that's not to say that I think this game is an outlier. I think he's got that ability. I think he's shown that ability. It's what he did at Miami of Ohio. It's what he's proven to be able to do. I think it just took him some time. He's played, tonight was his 12th game that he's even appeared in at Pitt this season, after playing 30-some games each of the last 3 seasons. I think it took him a little time to get comfortable, and an opportunity opened up. When you've got him, when Xavier Johnson was still here, you had Johnson, and you had Ethiel Horton, and you had Sabandi and Femi Odekale. And you were trying to get minutes for all those guys, knowing Johnson was going to play 35 minutes, 33 minutes, something like that. Horton was playing significant minutes. And then you're trying to work Sabandi and Odekale in. And it's sort of the same thing with Will Jeffress. And we'll talk about him in a little bit. I know people are wondering why Will Jeffress wasn't playing more earlier. I mean, you had Audice Toney and Justin Champagnie. So where are you going to fit in Will Jeffress for more than a few minutes in a game? Because you're not taking your 2 best players off the court. And that's not a disrespect to Will Jeffress. That's not a knock on him. And I'm going to talk about him in a little bit because he's got me as excited about as any of these guys right now. And I think Pitt fans should be really excited about the future for Will Jeffress. But I think you look at the roster makeup. Oh, why are Sabandi and Jeffress now getting minutes? Well, how much were you going to take Audice Toney off the court to get Will Jeffress in? How much were you going to take Xavier Johnson off the court to get Nike Sabandi in? I know what Sabandi did tonight, but he wasn't showing that throughout the season. This is sort of have a feel of sort of an all good things and all good time type of situation. And TRR says, Jeff Capel says there's a chance Nike comes back. What percentage do you put it at? I would put the percentage pretty high. And that's not based on any inside info or anything like that. Everybody has to make their decision. Guys are going to keep working on, he'll consider his options and decide what's best for him after the season. But he didn't walk at senior night. Terrell Brown went out, got recognized, got his hug from Jeff Capel at center court and all that stuff. Nike Sabandi did not. I'm assuming he's coming back. And this leads me into another big reaction coming out of this game, and is really a reaction born of the last 2 games. And that's about the core or the foundation you could be working with for next season. You're bringing Femi Odekale back. Potentially, you're going to bring Ethiel Horton back. Potentially bring Nike Sabandi back. You're bringing Will Jeffress back, who, like I said, I'm going to talk about him because I think he's a really exciting guy. And then potentially, and we'll see, I don't know if anybody really knows right now, potentially Justin Champagnie. If you just even look at a core of Odekale, I mean, look at those 5 guys that I just mentioned: Odekale, Horton, Sabandi, Jeffress, Champagnie. You're going to need a center. You're going to need, Abdul Kareem Coulibaly and, whoever else could step up there. And you'll have to figure out a rotation with those guys. But, I mean, that's a rock, I don't want to say a rock solid foundation, but that's a really talented foundation. I'm willing to trust Femi Odekale to be the starting point guard for 30 games next year. I'm willing to trust Nike Sabandi to play 30 minutes next season. If they want to go 3 guards and roll with Odekale and Horton and Sabandi night after night, I think that's perfectly fine. If they want to bring Horton off the bench to be, a spark, you know what I mean? Like an Ashton Gibbs when he was, in his first couple of years, a player like that, I think that's absolutely, that works. Start Odekale and Sabandi. Start Will Jeffress at the 3, start Champagnie at the 4, and Coulibaly at the 5. And brother, I think they'll go out and win some games. I mean, really, I really do. And I'm not overreacting just to this game because some of this is based on what they did against NC State. I think you're seeing a really promising young core here. Now, it all makes a big difference if you got Justin Champagnie. I mean, that changes the equation pretty considerably. But if your core of guards is Odekale and Sabandi and Horton, I think you could do a lot worse than that. And Will Jeffress, I'll get into it now. I keep saying that I'm going to talk about him at some point. I don't know. I'm really encouraged by Jeffers. Jeffers tonight, let's bring up his box score here. 8 points on 3 of 9 shooting, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 fouls, 2 turnovers. Not an eye-popping, stat sheet or box score or stat line. You're not going to say, holy cow, he scored 8 points on 3 of 9. But, boy, he looked good. Made that first basket, that long jump shot, and I said it, I tweeted it, and I felt it at the time. I said, Will Jeffers strikes me as that type of guy, a young player who he can, if he hits 1 or 2 early, if the shots start falling, he can get a little confidence about himself, get into a rhythm, and really be dangerous. And his defense is already there. Will Jeffers is a really good defensive player. He's got that working for him. What he needs to what needs to develop, what needs to come along is the offense. And I think he's shown flashes. He showed a little bit in the NC State game, and he showed more here against Wake Forest of what he can do on offense, how smooth of an athlete he is, how he's got a nose for the ball. Like I said, he ended up with 3 rebounds. It felt like more. He's got a knack for these things. He's a good basketball player. Young guy, as we all know. We know that storyline with Will Jeffers. But he's a really good player. And I think he's a guy who, as soon as next year, will be an impact player for this team. And I think you can look at him being part of that core, being part of that foundation that they build around next season and have some success with. All right, let's get into some questions and comments and reactions here. Of course, we got the super chatter jumping in. Michael B. You could be a super chatter. You want to if you're watching the live stream here. Throw a couple bucks to the podcast, throw a little support behind it. We appreciate it, and we'll definitely get to your comments and questions. We won't miss any super chatter, reactions. So Michael B jumps in, and we appreciate your support, buddy. He says it was nice to get a win. A couple questions. Do you think Pitt will land Reed, and do you expect a lot more transfers after the season? Do you think Nike returns? Efton Reed, the 5-star center. I mean, it seems like it's looking less and less likely. If we're going to get into the recruiting talk, it seems less and less likely that Pitt's going to land him. That would be a big-time get for Jeff Capel. It's been one of their primary focal points in the 2021 recruiting class, and it seems like that's slipping away a little bit and becoming less likely for Pitt. So that's going to be tough. Do I expect a lot more transfers after the season? If you're talking about guys leaving the Pitt program, I don't know about a lot. I wouldn't be surprised to see another 1 or 2. You can look down the roster and see guys who aren't getting much playing time, even in its depleted state. You know what I mean? Even when you've got, Tony and Johnson leaving the team, you have fewer guys, and plus John Hughley not being on the team, and guys are still not getting playing time. I mean, they may choose to look for opportunities elsewhere. And then the last question, you think Nike returns? Oh, but in terms of transfers, also, yeah, I think Pitt is going to bring in transfers. I think there's no question about that. I think that's pretty obvious. And I think Jeff Capel has that expectation every year, that he's going to lose some transfers and he's going to add some transfers. And that's going to be part of roster management, kind of the standard, the MO for roster management for a vast majority of teams in college basketball, Pitt included, is going to be losing transfers and adding transfers. That's always going to be part of it. And then Michael B says, you think Nike returns? I think he does right now. We'll see what happens. S. Max says, I can't believe the extremes of good and bad by Ethiel Horton this season. I'm trying to recall a former Pitt player that was so good at times and then so bad. I mean, like, the classic example of an inconsistent player was Gilbert Brown that one season when it literally was every other game. Double-figure scoring, single-digit scoring. Double-figure scoring, single-digit scoring. It was every game with Gilbert Brown. He was the classic example of an inconsistent player. Ethiel Horton, I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's still just getting settled in or what, but boy, the last few games, you're right, have been rough. NC State, he goes 0-4 from the field. He scores 1 point. He had 7 points against Florida State, 3 of 13 shooting. The game before that, the NC State game, he was 3 of 7 with 7 points. Tonight against Wake Forest, he didn't score at all. He went 0-4 from the field and only played 11 minutes. Although some people noticed that he seemed like he was limping a little bit, maybe hobbling, so maybe he's a little banged up. He only played 18 minutes against NC State, but Jeff Capel said he just wasn't playing well. Horton, a few people pointed it out. If Horton shows up and has a positive impact on the game at NC State on Sunday, they probably win that game. And I think he's going to be a key guy that they're going to count on for next season. He's just got to find a way to be consistent and fit into the offense. Maybe if Femi Odekale, becomes a good distributing point guard, maybe he's able to find things and set things up for Ethiel Horton. But yeah, right now, he's hot and cold. But you've got another guard who has stepped up and is ready to take those minutes if Horton can't contribute. And if Horton's going good, then you can go with 3 guards. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. To go with Odekale, Horton, and Sabandi. Let's see. Our guy Roman, another comment, question from him. Great the win. Will never be upset with a W, but Wake Forest is Stallings level bad. Jeff Capel definitely has his work still cut out for him this offseason. Have to make a postseason tournament next year. Yeah, Wake Forest isn't good. There's no question about that. I figured this would come up as a comment. A reaction that, Wake Forest is bad. Let's not react to this. Let's not over exaggerate. And I understand that, Roman, but Pitt lost to Wake Forest earlier this year with a full roster. Minus John Hughley, I guess. So I'm not going to spend too much time trying to discredit the win. And I know you're not saying that it should be discredited. I know you're just merely pointing out they didn't beat the cream of the ACC. In this game, and that's fine. And I'll perfectly acknowledge that. But this team couldn't beat Wake Forest on the road with a full roster. They've lost plenty of games they should have won to teams near the bottom. They got blown out by 26 by Notre Dame. You look at the litany of games that they played since Duke and how they played and how they performed against them. Some of those teams that were also near or at the bottom of the ACC. And I'll say absolutely, this game, this game means something to me. When they come into it with the depleted roster, when they're missing all the guys that they're missing the guys that they're missing, and all the storylines and all the drama and challenges and adversity these players have faced. I'm not going to take anything away. They went out there, they fought their tails off, and came out with a win, and looked pretty good doing it. I think I understand what you're saying, but I'm not going to take too much away from it. Let's see here. Brock Madonic says, even though it's a small sample size, I've liked what I've seen from Nike. Pretty sure we all know he could score like this. Yeah, I think so. That was the expectation with Nike Sabandi. When you looked at what he did at Miami of Ohio, you thought he was going to come in and play really well and score a lot, but it just didn't happen. Now, this is something that I don't know. You would need to get the coaches or the players in a moment of complete candor. But and maybe we'll ask our guy Steven Gertz about this. Steve does all our film breakdowns on Panther-Lair.com. Maybe he could look into this a little bit more and try to determine if Sabandi didn't produce during his opportunities earlier in the season because he was playing with Xavier Johnson. And that's not a knock on Johnson, but was it difficult to mesh Johnson's style with what Sabandi likes to do or needs to do or is able to do? And this may be a case where Johnson leaving opened up an opportunity, not just in terms of minutes for Sabandi, but open up an opportunity in terms of style, and open up an opportunity in terms of the chances he would get on the court and where he would get those chances and how he would get those chances. I'm not smart enough to say whether or not that's the case, but it is interesting to watch. Look, somebody, and I think we talked about this last Thursday, somebody had to step up other than Justin Champagnie. It couldn't just be Champagnie leading this team, carrying them all the way. Somebody else had to produce points for this team. And, against NC State, it was Femi Odekale. here against Wake Forest, it was Nike Sabandi. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next game, against Clemson on whenever the Saturday, the regular season finale, it might be, who knows, Ithiel Horton or something. My guess is it'll probably be Odekale or Sabandi again, but I wouldn't rule out pretty much any option. Somebody else had to step up, and tonight it was Sabandi. In previous games, earlier this season, prior to those guys transferring, it was Champagny and then, secondary scoring from Xavier Johnson or secondary scoring from Audice Toney. Somebody needed to step into that role, and maybe it was a little bit crowded with those guys here. And then you take them out, and there's all these opportunities. And so Odekale is able to shine, or Sabandi is able to shine. And we'll see who else is able to take advantage of it. Those two guys will keep pushing things forward. Let's see. Michael B says, should we be concerned about Horton? He seems lost on both sides of the ball. Like I said, it's just been an inconsistent season for Ithiel Horton. He's just been inconsistent, like you say, on both ends of the court. I think when he's been good, he can be a game changer. And I think if he could find some consistency, he can be a game changer, an impact player for this team, in the future. But he's got to find a way to be more consistent. And if he isn't, and you, like I said, you bring Sabandi back, then, I think you look at bringing Horton off the bench, which is not the worst place for a three-point shooter to work. Kevin Plouch just says, Nike Sabandi was a beast tonight. Justin Champagny found his groove again. The camaraderie is being developed. William Jeffers got huge minutes. These last two games are a small sample, but I like what I see. Yeah, I agree, Kevin. And I think when you look at, and I think we probably talked about this on Thursday as well. Once you got past kind of the initial sort of shock of Audice Toney and Xavier Johnson transferring, you started to think about what it meant for the future and what Pitt was going to be in the future, and how really these last few games were going to give us some insight into what this team would look like next season, and over the next two seasons. And I think we've gotten that. I think we've gotten some glimpses of what they might be. And I think, probably the good thing is you look at these two games and you say, okay, the defense is still there. So this is a very good defensive team. They rebounded the crap out of the ball against Wake Forest. They out-rebounded Wake Forest 42-23. Those are Jamie Dixon type numbers. Wake Forest had 4 offensive rebounds. Jamie would have loved this game, right? Pitt out-rebounded Wake Forest by 19. Wake Forest shot 35.8%, and Pitt had 13 turnovers. Jamie had 3 things. Dixon had 3 things that he always wanted the team to do. He wanted to out-rebound the opponent by 10. He wanted to hold the opponent under 40% shooting, and he wanted Pitt to commit 12 or fewer turnovers. So Pitt had 13, but they only had 6 in the second half, so they kind of got on track with that, after halftime. But this was the kind of game he would have loved, and he would have loved beating a conference opponent 70-57. Now, typically Dixon's teams were beating, top 15 teams or top 20 opponents 70-57, but you take what you can get at this point. But I think we said it on Thursday. That, look, this was going to give us sort of some insight into the future of what the future could potentially bring. And I think what we've learned so far is that Pitt can still be a really good defensive team, a pretty good rebounding team, and one that just needs to sort out its offense and find its offensive rhythm and where the points are going to come from. Now, the thing we've said since the very beginning, and this is a Jamie Dixon sort of mantra, and I think Jeff Capel would absolutely agree with it as well, is that your offense can come and go. There are going to be nights when when the shots fall, and there are going to be nights where the shots don't. Your offense will come and go. But if you defend and if you rebound, you will give yourself a chance every game. And Capel kind of talked about this after the NC State game. He said that, other than the Notre Dame game, we've been in a position over these last 10 games or so since the Duke game where you get to the final 3.5 minutes of the game, and it's a one-possession game. And they're just not able to close it out and finish it. I put that on the offense. They aren't able to get those crucial shots and make those baskets on offense. But because they defended well, because they rebound well, they've kept themselves in the games, and they've given themselves a chance at the end. And I think the team, they did that on Sunday against NC State. They did it in this Wake Forest game. Because, look, I talked about that 8-minute and 18-second stretch where Wake Forest didn't hit a field goal. By the end of that thing, Pitt was still only up by like 6. So they didn't pull away. Their offense couldn't put Wake Forest away, not at that point. I think they did a few minutes later. But during that long stretch without a field goal, Pitt wasn't able to put Wake Forest away. But because they defended so well, because they rebounded so well, they didn't give Wake Forest any second chance opportunities. Wake Forest had 5 second chance points and 4 offensive rebounds. And during that stretch, Pitt shut them down. One and done possessions almost every time for Wake Forest, up and down the court. And that's what kept Pitt in the game. That's what kept Pitt ahead of Wake Forest, because Pitt's offense wasn't really doing all that much either. And they ended up with pretty decent numbers, 70 points. They shot 46% from the floor, 40% from 3. They had good offensive rebounding numbers. They had 10 offensive boards. They played well enough on offense, but their offense, with this kind of defensive performance against Wake Forest, you should beat them by 20. But Pitt's offense isn't there yet. As long as their defense stays there and their rebounding stays there, they're going to give themselves a chance. And I think that's what this team is doing right now. It's what they've done for most of the season, and I think they'll do it again next year. I think they'll carry that over to next season. And like I say, if you can do that, you've got time for your offense to figure itself out. For Odikale to get more comfortable running the point, for Sabandi to get more comfortable in the offense, for Horton to find some consistency, for Jeffers to grow and develop a little bit. And all those things seem like natural progression elements. And if they progress, this team, I think its offense can come together. And this offense can play well and be pretty dangerous, particularly when you combine it with the defense and the rebounding. And there's a lot to like for the future of this team. H2P, a couple comments here. A few reactions beyond Nike Sabandi's breakout game. Number 1, it was nice to see Femi let the game come to him and not just force his offense after going scoreless in the first half. Number 2, a 42-23 rebound edge after out-rebounding a bigger NC State team last time out. And 3, just give Izzy Akudo the 13th scholarship. You got to wonder about Onyebuchi, Izzy Akudo. Coming in as the backup point guard, he played 7 minutes against Wake Forest. He scored a couple points, and the guy, he goes out. There's no doubting his effort, and I think most walk-ons, if they got their chance to be on the court, man, they would give every single ounce that they had. Izzy Akudo can actually play a little bit. He's kind of quick. He can defend well, and that's what you really want, I think, when you bring him in to give Femi Odikale a few minutes rest. You want him to come in and just defend like crazy and just be a complete pain in the butt for the opponent's point guard, and just hassle him and harass him and stay in his face and, poke at the ball. And that's what Onyebuchi Izzy Akudo was doing throughout this game, in the 7 minutes that he played, which filled the role perfectly. And if they don't end up filling all 13 scholarships next season, yeah, absolutely put the guy on scholarship. I don't think he's a senior yet. He might be a senior. I'll have to look that up. But if he's a junior, if he's coming back next year, put him on scholarship. Give him that opportunity. I think he's earned it. Let's see here. Some other comments. General So's Chicken says, it's my favorite win of the season. Happy for Terrell Brown to get a win on senior day, and for the players that I can only assume want to be here. Yeah, good for Terrell Brown. Terrell Brown, we've all got our own opinions about Terrell Brown. We've seen him, we've seen him be Terrell Brown, and that's not, I was going to say that's not necessarily a good thing, but Terrell Brown has been so tantalizing over the last 4 seasons now, as he's a 4th-year senior this season. And he's had moments where you say, boy, you could be a stud. You could be a dominant player in the ACC. You could be a really good center in the ACC. But it's just not clicking. You just don't give it all every night out. You don't give 100%. And that's what it looks like. The desire doesn't seem to be there. And he seems like he's got the physical tools that if he had the desire, if he could just back it up with just, a want to, I mean, he could be really good. And I think you saw it at, in the NC State game when he comes out with 11 and 11. First double-double of his career. First double-digit scoring game of the season. And, tonight he gets the start against Wake Forest on senior night. He ends up only playing 13 minutes and scores 4 points. But I thought and grabbed 4 rebounds. But I thought he played well. I thought he played hard. I thought he showed up and, gave more than he's given in quite a while. I'm trying to look at his blocks. So he didn't have any blocks. I'm surprised about that. Who did? Will Jeffers ended up with 2 blocks. Champagny ended up with 2 blocks. But it's just I don't know. And that's another one. You wonder, guys transfer, guys leave the team, and somebody like Terrell Brown comes out with more energy than he's had in a long time. That energy that's been so inconsistent to find, that effort and that desire and that, ability. It's just been so hard for him to consistently, sort of harness. And he comes out the game after those guys transfer and plays like he did at NC State, and then showed a little bit of it, in this game here on Tuesday night. So, good for him, though. I mean, you like to see a guy finishing his career on a high note. Like to see him come back, to be honest. I don't think I don't know what Terrell Brown's pro prospects are. I can't really think all that highly of him. He's certainly got size, and he can run pretty well for a guy his size, but it wouldn't seem that he's got great pro prospects. If he likes being in college, if he likes playing college basketball, why not come back? I mean, I think Pitt would take him back. I mean, it's not going to cost them a spot on the scholarship roster. They'd have to pay for the scholarship, of course, but it's not going to count against their 13 scholarship roster limit. So I don't know why he wouldn't. I don't think Pitt would say no. So it really would be up to Terrell Brown if he wants to come back. I think if he did, that would be a huge boost. Especially with John Hughley's situation being up in the air. If you could have Brown and Coulibaly, it's a pretty good center duo, I think. I think that's a competent center duo, particularly as Coulibaly continues to develop. But that's Terrell Brown's decision. He's got to decide what he wants to do. Let's see here. R. Hutchison says, Will Jeffers just needs minutes. He'll be excellent in time. He has had upperclassmen in front of him, plus he's 17 playing ACC hoops. Yeah, Will Jeffers, we can never forget the fact that he's extra young, that he's only 17 years old coming into his freshman year in college, and he's younger than everybody that he's playing against, younger than everybody that he's playing with. And I think we realized pretty early on, and maybe some of us even sort of recognized it before the season even started, that whatever you got out of Will Jeffers this year, whatever kind of positive developments or progression or growth you saw, it was all just going to be a net positive, because I think the expectations should have been and probably were pretty low for what he would do and what he would contribute and what kind of player he would be. And so kind of with that in mind, I think what we've seen out of Will Jeffers in the last 2 games, especially tonight, is nothing but encouraging. I feel like Will Jeffers right now, and I think we saw it a bit in the NC State game. I think we definitely saw it tonight against Wake Forest, and ideally we see it on Saturday, I guess, against Clemson. Will be, sort of tangible signs of development and growth. And I think just from Sunday to today, he looked like he took a couple steps forward of just being more comfortable on the court, more confident on the court. And maybe if he was getting consistent minutes throughout the season, that development and that progression would have happened maybe a little sooner. Maybe. I don't know. I'll come back to kind of what I said earlier, that it's tough because you had Au'Diese Toney and Justin Champagny on this roster. And I don't know how many minutes you were taking away from those guys to give a freshman time to develop. I know you would have wanted to see him out there more. I know we all would have wanted to see where he'd be now if he had gotten more playing time earlier. But the goal was to win games. The goal was to win games throughout the season, and so you went with your two best players in Tony and Champagnie. And those are the two spots where Jeffress would play. And so I just don't think there were many minutes available. There wasn't a lot in the way of opportunity for him. So that's why we didn't see him earlier. But we're definitely seeing a lot of him in these two games. He played 19 minutes at NC State. Got, 37 minutes, I think? Yeah, 37 minutes in this game against Wake Forest. He started in this game. Justin Champagnie came off the bench because he got a technical foul, 2 technical fouls in the NC State game. And so Jeff Capel has had that policy of if you get a technical foul, then you come off the bench the next game. So Jeffress got the start, played 37 minutes, and I think it was really good. Really good and really promising for the future. Let's see here. Josh Newark says, can Xavier Johnson and Audice Toney transfer to ACC schools? I forget the rule. I forget if they've lifted the rule or anything like that about transferring in the conference. I'm sure they can. I'm sure they would be able to if they tried. I'm sure they'd probably be able to play right away, to be honest, if they tried. I mean, it's becoming less and less. There are fewer and fewer rules and fewer and fewer rulings against players when it comes to transfers. I think pretty much anywhere those guys want to go, they can probably go and probably play right away. So I don't know if we'll see them. I don't know if they'll end up going to the ACC. Those guys have been linked to some different schools. Audice Toney's got a long list. Xavier Johnson's got a long list. So I don't think Pitt will see them in the ACC, but I think they probably could if they wanted to. TRR says Pitt's probably not getting Efton Reed, but getting John Hughley back would be big, and it seems like he might have the charges reduced. I don't know the legal status of John Hughley's situation. I don't know where he's at right now. I don't know what's going to happen there. Absolutely, I think if Pitt could get John Hughley back, it would be really big for the future of the program. I mean, I think it would be big for the team next season and the following couple of seasons. I think you would add a really talented player to the center position to work with and, potentially ultimately ahead of Abdul Kareem Koulibaly. I don't know what's going to happen with that situation, though. I think the fact that he's not officially off the roster yet means Pitt is willing to wait and see what happens with his legal situation. But who knows when that'll be resolved, and who knows what that resolution will be and what it'll mean for Hughley and his future at Pitt. Yeah, if it all works out, if everything goes as well as it possibly can and he ends up back at Pitt playing next season, yeah, I think that'd be huge for the team. I don't think there's any question about it. Scott Lynch asks, by what date will Pitt have a few commitments for next year's basketball class? That's a great question. That's a great question, Scott. I have no idea. It's hard to predict commitments sometimes. Especially that 2022 recruiting class. Those guys are, let's see, they're finishing up their junior year of high school, I guess, right now. I don't know. It seems like Jeff Capel and his staff have done really well with some guys in that junior class, some guys in that 2022 class. They've made some good connections, and they seem to be in good position with a number of guys. But when they're actually going to commit, I have no idea. Let's see here. Josh Newark asks, football question, do we have a spring practice schedule and a spring game yet? Spring game date yet? No, Josh, nothing official has been announced. I would expect that spring camp will start in 2 weeks. If it was a normal year, I think they would start next week and then take a week off for spring break like they did last year. Unless spring break would be next week, and then they would just start the week after spring break. But nevertheless, my guess is they'll start in 2 weeks and then go for 5 weeks up until the final Saturday would be April 17th is my expectation on what spring camp will look like. Whether they'll actually have a spring game, I don't know. And I know there have been restrictions lifted on attendance and all these things. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And for me to sit here and claim that I do, I would be lying. So I'll find out when you do, Josh, or as soon as I find out, I'll let you know. Let's see here. Michael B. says, if Pitt wins against Clemson this weekend and wins a couple games in the ACC tournament, do you think Pitt will get invited to the NIT? They'd have a chance, right? I don't know. Josh Newark actually followed up to that question and says the NIT is only 16 teams this year, so I highly doubt Pitt has had a chance. Yeah, I don't. I'm not banking on any postseason for Pitt, unless they run the table and win the ACC tournament. Even if they beat Clemson, that gives them 11 wins. If they win it, they would have to win a couple games. Whatchamacallit? They'd have to win a couple games in the ACC tournament. That would get them to, realistically, maybe 13 wins. They finished the regular season 13-11 or so. I don't think that's getting invited to any tournaments. And I think Jeff Capel probably would like to have more games for his guys to play, but I also don't think he's going to be too disappointed when the season ends. I think he's looking forward to sort of moving on from this season, and I imagine his players might be too. But I think if they have an opportunity to finish on a high note, win the Clemson game, win a game or two in the ACC tournament, and then acquit yourself nicely, don't get blown out in the game where you do get bounced from the ACC tournament, I think everybody will feel pretty good heading into next season, especially if Justin Champagnie were happen to decide to stay. So that would be a pretty big bonus. Brock Madonic says, have you seen how many suitors have reached out to Audice Toney? It's a long, long list. Yeah, somebody who tweeted that, I forget. Somebody tweeted out a list. Yeah, there was a lot of schools that have reached out to Audice Toney already. People are, schools are interested, and why wouldn't you be? He's a great defensive player. If nothing else, he's going to give you a great defensive player on the wing who could even be a small four. And, he's a scrappy offensive guy, too. He gets offensive rebounds, putbacks, those kinds of things. He's a good player. I don't think anybody questions the talent level of Audice Toney and Xavier Johnson. Nobody says, and nobody should say, that Xavier Johnson's a bad player or Audice Toney's a bad player. If you say that, I think you're just sort of being bitter about maybe some of the reports and rumors that have come out about them, or you just didn't watch them. Oh, yeah, Brock Madonic says Jeff Borzello listed a long list on Twitter. Thanks, Brock. I appreciate it. Neither of those guys was a bad player. Neither of those guys is a bad player. But there are questions about how they fit in at Pitt and how they fit in with this roster and how they fit in on the court and how their play on the court impacted the roster and impacted the team and how they're, how they meshed with the team off the court, and the team chemistry and the culture and the impact they had on it. I don't think, I'm not inclined to say, boy, they left and now the culture completely turned around. I think they might have been liked by their teammates. I'm not going to say, well, nobody liked them on the team. But when you have a change like that, you can reap positive benefits even if you didn't realize it ahead of time, if that makes any sense. Just having the change can just sort of, just create a different kind of vibe, a different kind of atmosphere. And that might be good. Sometimes change just for the sake of change is good. And I think there might have been more than just change for the sake of change when it comes to Toney and Johnson. But I think sometimes change can just be a positive thing. Just to have a different perspective, just to have different voices in the locker room. Different guys are going to have to step into leadership roles now. Different guys are going to have to be the main guy. You still have Champagnie, but you're going to have some other guys step up. Odekale looks like he's ready to step up. Sabandi tonight looked like he was ready to step up. You're going to have other guys become sort of team leaders in whatever role that Toney and Johnson filled. And I think I think that can be an exciting process for a team. Anthony Tennyson says, I think the basketball team can be really good offensively if they get some new offensive sets. They look so stagnant sometimes. Tony, I don't know, man. I read our film breakdowns that our guy Steve Gertz does for us. He does an amazing job. He knows so much more about basketball than I ever will, and I learn something from him all the time. I think there's a feeling that Jeff Capel just rolls the ball out on the court and says go play, and then that's it. And he doesn't coach much beyond that. I don't think that's the case. When I read Steve's film breakdowns of Pitt's offense and defense. They're doing things. They're trying to do things. They're running things. They don't execute them very well. I don't know if it's the best X's and O's staff in college basketball. I think Kevin Stallings, for everything you want to say about him or whatever you want to say about him, was a pretty good X's and O's coach. He knew the game. He could draw plays up, and he was good in that regard. I don't know about Jeff Capel in that regard, but I think it's more than people want to give him credit for. I think there's more coaching going on than people want to assume or believe. So I don't know if there's a problem with the types of offensive sets they're trying to run, or if it's just a problem with the way they execute those offensive sets. The guys need to be sharper. Guys need to be crisper. Guys need to have a little more effort, a little more urgency. All those things that Jeff Capel has talked about. I think that's probably what they need. As much as new offensive sets, I think they just need a little more attention to detail and a little more urgency in the way they run the offensive sets. Matthew Scabaloni says, what are the chances you would give Champagnie of staying? I don't know. It's hard for me to put a percentage on that. You look at some of the things, you look at like his comments after they announced that Pitt would play St. John's next year, where of course his twin brother, Julian Champagnie, is a player. And he was asked about that. Justin Champagnie was asked about the opportunity to play against his brother, Julian. And he talked about how much he's looking forward to it. He talked about how much he wants to play in that game, how excited he is to finally get an opportunity to play against his brother. And, words. I know, and we don't, we know not to put too much stock into what guys say in these kinds of situations when they're talking about their future and whether they might go pro or not go pro. I mean, the reality is he's ranked among the top 25 or 30 prospects for the upcoming draft. That's hard to turn down. But, I mean, you see little things that seem to point toward the possibility that he could come back. I don't know what a percentage chance is, Matt, or Matthew. I apologize if you prefer Matt or Matthew, but I don't know what the percentage chance is. I think there's a real shot that it could happen. I'm not sure I can go much further than that in coming up with an expectation. All right, as we wrap it up, I guess final thoughts on this game. I mean, obviously, individual performances. Sabandi, big-time standout. William Jeffress, really impressive. Oh, Justin Champagnie, no big deal. Just another double-double with 20 and 13. I mean, this guy is he's a heck of a player. And it was funny in the second half. There was a stretch. I made a little note of it. He was out for a little more than 3 minutes. Jeff Capel gave him a break. He was right around the under 8 minute timeout, and Pitt was only up by 6 at that point. And Capel kept Champagnie on the bench, gave him a little more rest because he could. And then Champagnie finally came back in at the 5:55 mark, and it was interesting because he came in, and one of the first things he did was drain to 3, and then like the very next possession, he had this hard fought layup for a basket where he just fought through contact. And I mean, Champagnie's a fun guy to watch. He doesn't do anything really on the dribble. That's not his game. He's not a penetrating. He's not going to drive. He's not going to try and go to the hoop like that. But he'll get offensive rebounds, catch and shoot. He's got a beautiful pull-up jumper. He can hit some shots from 3, and he's strong around the basket. The rebounding numbers show that. And I think his ability to finish around the basket shows that as well. He's a fun player to watch, and someone that I'm sure Pitt would love to have a third year out of him. It would be really fun to see what he could do in a third year, particularly with all these guys being a year older, with playing with Odekale for a little longer, playing with Will Jeffress for a little longer, and it'll be interesting to see. I don't know what he's going to do. We're coming back to Matt Scabaloni's question about chances of him returning, but back to this game. Like I say, Sabandi looked really good. Jeffress looked really good. Odekale didn't produce a lot, but I still liked how he played. I thought he did well out there. And overall, like I say, it's a fun team to root for right now. I think they're the kind of team you can root for because they're this young, sort of scrappy underdog team. Guys that are growing up right in front of you with all these new opportunities that they're getting, all this extra playing time they're getting, whether it's Odekale or Sabandi or Jeffress. they're getting all this extra time, and you're seeing them grow and develop right there. It's fun. And you get at least one more game plus the ACC tournament. So I guess there's at least 2 more games to watch these guys go out and play. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do against Clemson. You should go check out homefieldapparel.com. I got to mention them before we head out of here. Home Field Apparel, great gear. It's awesome looking. It's high quality product. It's so comfortable. T-shirts, sweatshirts, homefieldapparel.com. Get some sweet Pitt gear there. And lots of other schools as well. They have just great collection. Panther-Lair.com, of course, is the website. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting. You can find it all right here, right there. Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have message boards, and they're lively tonight. I'm sure they'll be lively throughout the week with people talking about this Pitt basketball team. If you're a Pitt fan and you want to talk to other Pitt fans, go to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. If you're watching the live stream here on Tuesday night, we really appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you click subscribe to the YouTube channel there, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll never miss a live stream when big news happens, like on Thursday when Adise Toney and Xavier Johnson went into the transfer portal. We fire up the live stream Dream Machine and get going for a live Panther-Lair show. You don't want to miss that, right? So get notifications by subscribing to Panther-Lair.com on YouTube. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Saturday morning, 8 a.m., we've got the Panthers Insider Show on Sports Radio 93.7 The Fan. We'll have plenty of Pitt sports talk on Saturday morning, so make sure you tune in for that at 8 a.m. And then, of course, every Tuesday night, we're right here for the Panther-Lair Show, 8:30 p.m. on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks to everybody who jumped in on the live stream tonight. Thanks to everybody listening to the podcast throughout the week. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you next Tuesday night.